Hello everybody and welcome to this episode of Building for Peace with Hannah Jewell. Today we have Oliver Smyth with us. He works in the film and animation industry. He has several Emmy and BAFTA nominations and awards, and he's a dear friend. I'm so delighted to welcome you here today, Oli.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So our topic today is technology, what it is to be human, and artificial intelligence. And as artificial intelligence has just exploded into the general population, I thought we might start there. You are an animator and work in the film industry, so
That's right.
Where are you coming from with AI? What's cool about it to you? What's not cool?
Well, it's something I need to be aware of. I think I tend to be a little bit of a Luddite, or I like to do things in a really traditional way. And my work partner, Jim, is very much into all of this stuff, and I think it's quite healthy to kind of look at it from the point of view as what you want to get out of it as a human making things, and yeah, sort of resist the fear. For me, it's a little bit about, like, it seems like a scary thing, and people very much follow this sense that it might just stop everybody's jobs and take over the world in many ways, and many things will be done without the need for humans. And I think what's happened in recent weeks, even months, is we've gone from this position of feeling as creatives, we've still got the monopoly on creativity. You know, even AI, it's still some sort of automaton. But there really seems, with the recent developments, that it's coming for those sort of creative jobs as well. You know, because if you put into some of these big language models, if you want to write a documentary or something, you would expect that it could just give you some ideas and build up some stuff and take some things out of the internet, but it's doing a lot more than that. You know, it's tying things together in a way that feels almost human, and some of the things that are being done with the visual simulations and these sorts of things, people still have a sense that it feels unnatural and plasticky and maybe not what a human would do, but at the same time it's such early days and so vastly impressive that it does make you stand back and think, if this is just the beginning, where are we headed?
Yeah. We were chatting earlier, and there's two key things for me when I consider AI. And I would say my tendency is also more Luddite oriented, or maybe more earth-based.
Earth-based, that's a better way to put it.
Exactly. But I'm not jumping on the bandwagon with such eagerness. So the two things that come up for me are, one, the creative process.
Yes.
And if we have children who can put in 3 or 4 words and an entire image set, movie can be created, we have just robbed them of creative process. How will they know it? How will they learn it? And for me, creative process is an essential part of what it is to be human.
That's interesting. I do agree with that. I think the other side of it is, though, that is it freeing if used properly? There's kind of been a control of creativity by people that have some sort of basic skill set. You know, if someone is a good draftsperson, they're allowed access into being a painter and thinking creatively. Maybe it opens up what creativity can be, you know, so people don't feel put off. They've got those initial building blocks. It's just to what degree we're giving over control, or where the vision stops, or where it's a true collaboration between man and machine. I think that's the interesting place.
Thank you for reframing that for me, that it's actually more about control. As you were speaking, I saw that creativity, okay, it can be applied to many things, and actually we need a leap in creativity to solve some of our issues around climate, food, housing, etc.
Yeah.
So actually it could be really helpful in these ways, but control then is the main issue.
I think, yeah, understanding quite how much power we're developing is the main issue, and I think it's freeing and wonderful to give every human all these potentials and possibilities if we keep a focus on what we want to get out of that for ourselves. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean in a as humans, what do we want these things to be? What do we want our children to be able to do with this technology? Because it is huge. What's the possibilities? And I think the danger comes in not fully understanding how big a transformation is happening in right now and in coming decades. And I think, yeah, the main mission really, in my mind, is being clear about what's most important to us and where we want our human impact to be clearly felt. In my line of work, there's been huge developments recently, and like I say, part of my reaction is to kind of, oh, let's just do things the way that I know how to do them, but I think it's good to try and be open to it at least. And my work partner Jim is very enthusiastic about new technology, and I think it's important to at least have an understanding of what's happening. And the big thing that's been transformative recently is game engines. There's this thing called Unreal Engine which people are using, and I'll try and avoid being too geeky about it, but effectively games are very good at rendering things live, whereas animators might work on a very simple model and then send it off to be rendered for many days. Now the technology, I don't fully understand how it works, but it's able to take photorealistic things and have many thousands of things all in the same scene, light effects, motion captured humans, things that look very real. And it's I think essentially what the technology is good at doing is rendering just what you need to look at, which sort of is similar to how our brains work. From my understanding, we have a sense that we see the whole picture all the time, but we're only looking for the novelty that doesn't fit our internally created model. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, that's what things like Unreal Engine are doing. But they're enabling people to make vast worlds that look very realistic. And again, these are all developing things that double at least every 2 years, probably more, the exponential scale of growth and development of these things. So the potential that used to be very science fiction of people living in unreal worlds is becoming more and more present, and personally it fills me with dread. But great options and potential for filmmaking. Many TV shows now are made in a big space, so all the background is live rendered. If you've got a fantastical science fiction environment, you can have a live rendered background rather than it being sent off to be done in post for a while. All that's done before, and you can actually see the people in the real space with the cameras interacting with things. Motion captured humans moving around, different sorts of creatures, all right there in front of us. And just the rate of change and how fast it seems to have come upon us is incredible.
In a sense, we're moving beyond the physical.
Yeah.
Into realms of light and sound, which on the one hand is what happens after we die, when we're moving through the astral dimensions. And this is a part of every ancient system, whether you call it the bardo or purgatory or going to heaven or to hell, or these journeys through the astral dimensions are part of what happens to a spirit after death, though the body stays on earth. Those dimensions are made of light and sound. So if we are wanting to put ourselves into unreal worlds that are made of light and sound and are not physical, I wonder if there's a connection to our ability to move into those realms without the technology. I wonder if that will be an outcome, that it expands the collective consciousness. That would be a positive one. And I see what you're saying about the dread. We all picture the scenario of the person with the VR headset on and they're not eating, because we already see this happens with gaming, right? There's horrible stories of people whose own pets and children have died because they were so caught into their game world that they neglected. So if this is already happening, then once that VR headset goes on, there's an even greater chance of that.
Yeah, and it's, I think what's called into question is what is real. People are more aware of their own internal realities and that they can control their own internal realities. And when people strongly believe things or believe conspiracies even, to some extent it's all real for them. Everything is real. And we used to, I think, be held by a sense of a core, unchanging central reality. And I think, in a way, if to frame it as positively as possible, I think it is allowing us to think in a more spiritually open way, in that reality is just a handhold for us to work on deeper concepts that are moving through us as spirit beings. But again, I don't know if that's the focus of the people developing
these tools. Exactly. Exactly. I've often thought of the internet as just a reflection of our growing awareness that we are all connected. And then it became its own thing. And AI, we could see, is a reflection of our inner awareness that we create reality, that we are creators, that we live in dimensions beyond the physical. But then what happens with that, light or shadow? Do we have the current intelligence as a species to grapple with it?
No.
We must.
Sorry, yes. I meant yes.
We must, or we wouldn't be sitting here talking. But how are we going to get through this as a unified human species? I believe there's no way through this but together. I don't know myself yet how we get there yet.
But I think it's just realizing that we're kind of babies, and like having compassion for ourselves in that way, because we are just a bit like, oh, a new thing, oh, the potentials, it's shiny, let's do more of that, and we lose focus on why all the time. So yeah.
Well, one more thing on this unreal is that in the last 20 years we have seen so much change already, and in my own personal experience, my children got really into this Minecraft world making.
Oh, no, tell me about it.
Early stages, right?
My kids do.
Yeah, so when we're going to now have possibly even toddlers in unreal spaces and then feeding back and creating unreal spaces, I don't know what we do with that. On the one hand, we're empowering them as creators. On the other hand, how will they learn how to grow a flower, how to grow a potato, how to be in the physical?
My optimism tells me that in a generation or two, we'll have got the novelty out of the way. And we'll go, well, actually we don't want, a shiny little thing that flashes won't be exciting to us. That'll be really boring, and everybody's got one of those. Grandma's got one of those. We don't need that stuff. We know that it feels good to interact with nature and other people. This is, I'm being very optimistic here. In a sense, technology can become hidden and only useful in terms of how we need it. we could be living in wooden houses that just have the stuff there that we need, but is not on show.
And this is a whole nother conversation, which I don't think we'll go into today, but the integration of nature and technology and the building of houses out of mycelium that are heat sensitive, that increase the heat, decrease it, all these things, like a living organism home. I don't know if that will become a reality or not, but that idea's already been floated and it's being worked on.
And biotechnology is moving in the direction of being able to use organic material as the basis of its calculative thing, rather than it being silicon or whatever else. We can't replicate what nature can do, but in the way that people develop viruses and things like that, vaccines. Okay, so I just couldn't think of the word. So vaccine development seems to be, I know which is a contentious subject, but again, from working on a program to do with it, it seems that it's a real collaboration between what nature has to offer and what the technology has to offer and what the end result is, rather than, I always assumed making vaccines was a real hacking together code and it's all very man-made, but we can't do what nature can do, but we can get our heads around the tricks that it plays and use those to our advantage. And that
previous cultures, the technology we would have used to do that is called shamanism.
Right.
So we're at a new place now. And it's popped up so many times in recent conversations. The ancient and the new are meeting.
Yeah.
And I suppose if we maintain our sense of we are the creators in this, and we do have a responsibility for its outplay over many generations, then we can meet this meeting with joy, inspiration, groundedness, infinite possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What is most important to you as a human being, and how might that change the way you approach AI?
Good question. I don't really know how to answer that. I think, you can answer that in sort of a larger way of what's important as a human, in terms of feeding ourselves and looking after the elderly and education and all these things. But what's important from a creative point of view, what feels good, is doing something that speaks to others and communicates something. I guess that's the heart of the arts, is it? And so I think not losing the human sharing and interaction, and because I guess the purpose of art, there's so many ways to think about it, and there's no one way to frame it. But to me, it's a language. It's saying something that's beyond language, or it's in a secular world, it's kind of replacing religion in a way that we're able to speak about things that really matter to us, or that just make us feel nice or make us feel sad, but we want to communicate that. And you can do that in dance and writing and architecture, and you can do that in so many ways. And I think it's harnessing that and figuring out, I guess I haven't figured out, like, what is the core of that, what is the bit that's the
this
we need to hold on to.
Fascinating, because artists up until now have had intention in the creative process. And, in traditional shamanic cultures, there would have been prayers put into creative process, whether that was weaving a belt or a basket or making a quiver of arrows or a teepee, right? Or whether it was creating really ornate beauty and communication through architecture. But there was an intention about what to communicate. And then, of course, that's evolved in political intention. Art's been very political and about creating beauty and bringing us together. When AI puts these things together, there can be a sense of that in the words, but there's nothing behind it. And I'm wondering if that intention that the human feels in the process is the most powerful thing or not. Do the words themselves, does the product itself communicate something without any human intent behind it?
Yeah, it goes to the heart of what we are, doesn't it, completely? And I think when you try to define bringing expression through the human, it feels it is a spiritual question to me. You know, Osho talks about being the hollow bamboo. You know, and it's all these concepts that are very much like, you know, emptiness in Buddhism, and this idea that if you, the egoic self, can get out of the way and you can allow something to flow through you, that is the true expression. So, I mean, is it really just taking the ego of humans away? I mean, there's a potential there, isn't there, if you're doing it with non-human entities creating things. They might not have that unless their priorities are our current priorities at the moment as a human race, which is economic and, you know, growth sustaining things, you know, and yeah, it's kind of it's broad.
Yeah, artists have traditionally been on the fringe. They've been the ones to bring up those difficult topics and those things that don't want to be looked at, and be able to bring them up in a way that's palatable and receivable and can shift a mindset. So if we take that dimension out and we allow AI to play this very vital role in creativity, then what we're looking at is a different set of priorities. AI is not artificial. It was created. It is programmed. There are certain ideas in it, and that will keep changing. But there are certain priorities embedded with it now at the beginning. And whatever is in the seed of something has a huge impact on its eventual total expression. So how are we going to account for those priorities around profit, economics, etc., that are programmed into the initial AI? How are we as humans going to attend to that thoughtfully?
Well, yeah, that's the core of it, I guess. I don't know. I feel maybe slightly, well, very pessimistic about that, because I don't see a clear way as a whole human race that we can get right on that now. It's easy to talk about, like, getting our priorities in line, but more and more the world is shrinking in on itself and taking its ball home and wanting to think in a much smaller way, and everybody is concerned with what's right there in front of them, and not thinking on these grand scales that these large problems, like this is what we call information disruption. This is the potential for AI to change the world in a way that we haven't seen coming. But AI, or artificial intelligence, is not. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's not anything. It's a tool. It's yet another tool, and we just need to understand what our intention is for it ultimately. I know that that's an easy thing to say. Understand what our intention is for it ultimately, but I guess a key thing is explaining to people or how much it's going to transform things, and really coming up with good ways of seeing through or following through on, all right, if we continue with this sort of behavior, this is where we get to, just the way we interact with it in advertising and in social media. I don't think we fully understand our own brains and our own mechanisms, and what we have in social media. This isn't my idea, I'm getting this from reading other things, but it's a perfect feedback loop. We're in a world which is in constant problem solving mode. People call it, right brain, or a sort of more patriarchal sort of way of being. That's what we're in. And it means that we're not good at just settling into what we are. We're always just focused on what we're doing and where we're going and reaching out and grasping. And so our brain's constantly in problem solving mode, and then we're presented with this kind of mirror to our own minds that's just can give us more stuff that will just fire off all the synapses and make more connections, and it's more and more and more, and it's a loop that we're not in control of. Or even if you're aware of those things, you can find yourself taken in by advertising or social media. And I always find it so surprising, with awareness of that, it can still happen. So I guess my point is, education around how we work as beings is needed in a more fundamental way in order to interact with this thing which has so much scope now.
Yeah, I see education in two ways that you've just mentioned. One, to really investigate what is it to be human, and how do we work, not just from a neurobiological perspective, but having that education more widely available would be useful, but also from a humanistic perspective. Is compassion a natural part of the human? Do we want it to be? Shall we program that into our AI? Shall we make it a priority in our schools and our families? Or other things, care for the elder that you mentioned earlier. What actually is fundamental to humanness? And then on the other side, how does AI work? We don't know. We drive cars without knowing how they work. We use the internet without knowing how it works. Maybe could you start with sharing a little bit more about what is information disruption? That is one of the things. I've not heard this before.
Okay. Well, there's two things there. The first is there are positive and people trying to grapple with this stuff and how you can use it best. I think Oxford University is doing some amazing things with their computer department is looking at ethics and various things like this, but they have there's a philosopher at Oxford called William McCaskill who I don't think just by himself but with some other very intelligent people was talking about how we can do charitable giving in a way that uses information technology and analytics and algorithms to take sort of the unuseful human aspects out of it. A lot of charitable giving, for example, is not very the money's not funneled in the right directions, and maybe you can use the technology and the science and the data to find the better ways to get to the causes and highlight what your causes are, and also take the humanity out of it in a way, because humans think in stories, and we our priorities are often skewed, and there's been research into the idea that if we hear about a girl trapped down a well, lots of people care about that. But if you hear about 10 men that die in a boat, it's, for some reason, it's less of a story to us. And our priorities are shifting depending on what's close to us and so forth. So the point really is, take that bit out of the way and say, what do you care about? Do you care about saving lives? Do you care about educating people? Do you care about getting fresh water to people? Tell us what your priority is, and then we can use the technology to really, really be to the point on that in a way that a human wouldn't be able to be.
So this is human-machine interaction.
Yeah, and it's saying, look, it's almost like using it as a teacher or a wiser platform that says, you can just really cut through the bullshit. I'm going to be concerned with some middle ground stuff which I know is not important. I want you to go from there to there, and here's my resource to do it. Mm-hmm. Things like that are...
So it's not taking the human qualities out of the picture.
No.
And it actually might help us to clarify.
It's taking our biases out, I guess. That's a better way to put it. And we are very biased, and I think we live in a world where we can't even have the discussion around our biases. We have to be very careful around our language, and that's a whole other subject. Yeah. But I think ultimately people care about the same things, and coming from a place of compassion and knowing that you can ignore that level is useful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then your other point was about...
So you mentioned this information disruption thing.
Yeah.
So maybe you can do two things. One, just explain the mechanics of that. And then two, let's brainstorm about what that could look like in a really positive way and what it could look like in a really negative way, and think about the impact on the future generations. Because that kind of thinking, is it happening out there? Is anybody thinking about the outplay of this long term for the future generations in all the various spectrum of ways that could look?
I know that lots of good people are thinking about that, but I don't think we're thinking about it as a general society, and I don't know whether there's... The pessimistic part of me thinks there's a level of society that just wants to maintain the status quo there, but I think to go into what is AI, do you understand, do you have a sort of mental model for what it is that's doing the thing?
I don't, and I would guess that a lot of our listeners and a lot of users of AI at the moment don't either.
Well, doing animation, we sometimes work on interesting science documentaries and things like that. It's a brilliant thing for learning. I learn all sorts of stuff that I wouldn't have to do, and I have to figure out how to explain it in pictures. And this one wasn't me, actually. It was a wonderful animator that works for us called Heather Gretton, and she did this piece that explained how AI is effectively an input and an output, very much like our brains. So if you want to say, you need to teach this AI how to differentiate between a cat and a dog, you can put inputs that say, dogs look a bit like this, they've got spiky ears that are less like the shape of cat's ears or a certain type of tail. And then there's outputs of, does it get it right? And you can say, once in a while, tick, you've got it right. So we know the inputs, we know the outputs, and there's just trillions of nodes in between. And we don't know anything that's going on in between. We just know we're saying, look for this, and then when it finds it, we're saying, you've found it, that's good. And then it learns by making the neural connections like our brains work in a way. It strengthens the connections that take it directly to the answer, effectively. Mm-hmm. So over time, it's practicing and it's getting better and better results about, right, okay, so you've said that's a cat, all right, so that's a cat, and eventually it's got a very strong model for being able to identify that thing over there is a dog and not a cat. Mm-hmm. And it's that on a very, very complex scale. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is why it's a different sort of technology, because it's not a mechanical thing of we know where to go and where the carburetor is. It's like we're just putting things in and getting things out, and there's a whole world inside that's like our brains, that we understand a certain amount about our brain chemistry, and that we make neural connections, and sometimes it's good to have strong neural networks that work in a certain way and make, they work in patterns, which is a good and a bad thing in many ways, but AI is effectively doing the same thing.
Okay, let's get back to postulating about the future generations.
Yes, sorry, it was a rabbit hole later,
because you brought up something that I want to go with, and this is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
That's another vital aspect of what it is to be human.
Yes.
And the part of our brain that handles that is the limbic system, right? Is there anything like a limbic system within AI? Is it possible for the mechanics of AI to have energy behind it? Because emotion isn't just a word, it's a physiological, energetic phenomenon.
Right. I'm fighting the urge in me to kind of just be very anti-technology, because that's sort of where I have come from. I'm trying to play the opposite side here. So it's I think that they do. In Yuval Noah Harari, in his book *Sapiens*, he made a really good point talking about computer algorithms and comparing them to human emotions. So he said, if a monkey's in a tree wondering whether it should run for the fruit even though the lion's over there, it's not doing complex mathematics, it's feeling emotion. and that is a sort of mathematical algorithm of how risky is this versus how much the reward is. And there's this whole philosophy called game theory, which is to do with that. Anyway, so why couldn't we have an algorithm that was doing things that were used or felt in the body, in a body, in a similar way? Because from a certain point of view, and I'm not saying I think this is the only case, but emotion is just a shortcut felt sense for risk analysis or so
emotion does play a bigger part in human choice, though,
Yeah.
beyond risk. Emotion lets us know what's important to us and provides the basis for our decision making, not always in a reactive way, but often in a really deep and thoughtful way. Yeah, and
it's nice to feel that. And what's the place for intuition, or how do we feel about intuition, you know? I think if you're in a situation where you can save the baby or save the old person or stop the ticking time bomb, you know, and you can't do anything, you can't do them all at once. I think a human would have some sort of story structure to why they are doing the thing that they do, but a machine would be able to it'd be just pure logic in a sense, the way out of that situation, which might be, okay, so the old person's not going to survive or whatever, you know. It would make a firm decision, which a human would find some story reasoning behind why they were doing what they were doing. And I mean, I don't believe that's the full story. I believe very much in intuition and the sense that in a pressured situation I have guidance from a higher power. And I'm happy to believe, on one hand, that's because that's just the kind of creature that I am that believes in that sort of thing. But also, that's part of the nicety of being human, isn't it? That everything's not reduced to the basics, noughts and ones and logic.
Right, because AI could be seen as the ultimate outplay of a reductionist and mechanistic philosophy, which has already got us into a lot of trouble.
Yes.
It's produced most of our climate issues, most of our mental health issues, this philosophy. So if we're continuing down that road, what hope is there? I mean, that's the totally apocalyptic, nihilistic view, right? So let's juxtapose those now. You know, the good possibilities and the really horrible ones.
Should we start bad or good? I think the bad ones.
What does your heart tell you?
Oh, always start bad. Start with bad. Get it out of the way. I think in the medium to short term, you know, there's a real danger that people, we use that term information disruption. That's things like job losses, frankly. You know, the fact that things will be done by machines that currently are done by humans, and there'll be lots of people that don't have a sense of place in society, and that is I think that's a very
that cuts
dangerous
to the root
and dark
of
thing.
Belonging.
Yeah,
Which is incredibly important for mental health and sanity.
Yeah, and as we've been talking about this, I think belonging is the key thing, isn't it? Through creative pursuits and through just being a human on the planet, you want to have a sense of belonging, and even if you're not doing anything practical, just being part of something that you understand and is shared and has a central heart is what it's all about.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we're in danger of missing the point on that one, I think, and just going for all the things that this, perpetuating the, reaching out, grasping, economic growth, which we're in this pattern, I think, through fear ultimately, because we hit liberalism and free market and economics has been so wonderful for the world and for stability. I know we're still in a very messed up world, but in the since the end of the Second World War, things have been largely improving for everybody, and everybody's kind of like, this is the way to go. Let's just keep that thing that keeps ticking up.
You're right. In the Middle Ages, there was not one place on this planet that was not at war.
Yeah, but I think everybody feels that we're getting to a point where we've pushed that idea, and people are losing faith in that idea and stepping back from it. And I think certainly in terms of how we treat others, talk about others, feel about things outside our borders, certainly in this country, and I think it's a world scale thing. I think there's just we've lost focus on what matters as humans, or we're scared to really get to the brass tacks of what we're going to have to do, big changes in terms of how we live and operate to continue.
Correct me if I'm not hearing you correctly, but it's some of the greatest disruptions that could be caused are not from the technology itself, but from the impact that using the technology will have on the social fabric of existence.
Yes.
And that is what has not been thought through.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How we interact with each other already, how people find relationship partners has already changed dramatically in the last 20 years. It's not going to be long until we trust computer algorithms to make more decisions for us, because they can cut through some of the things that are unhelpful for us, so we cede control more and more. Mm-hmm. Even in simple ways. And then there is, as well as information technology, there's biotechnology, which is a very real thing, and those two things have a crossover, and they will do more and more in the future. And at some point we sort of we can, without focusing on what we want to keep within ourselves, we can accidentally step into a world where the rich are all sort of genetically transformed, biologically transformed. They have the ability to have access to all the information and all the power.
So, Oli, can you pick up on this point of the intersection between biotechnology and information technology?
I always get a bit confused between the two, but effectively they're both developing at an exponential rate, and they really have the impact to change humans fundamentally. And I think it only drives the potential, as we're with our current trajectory, of separating the rich and the poor and the haves and the have-nots. Mm-hmm. And again, it's just down to this point of what do we want, because I don't think anybody does want that world where there's just 10% of people with genetic and biological enhancements and all the information at their fingertips and all the power to change things as they want them, and then everybody else not having that. I don't think that's a very happy world.
Mm-mm. And we might be blindly walking into that world.
That's how it seems, and that's, I've read a few things around that idea, that and if you think about it, the small ways technology has had an impact on our lives in the past 20 years, it's essentially this point that we have the power to do things in our own control, how we want them to be, but we are not thinking broadly enough about what the impact on ourselves, our very essence as creatures, as beings, is. And we're at that stage. This is the ecological state is the Anthropocene now, which is defined as the stage where humans have the potential to destroy themselves completely. You know, we know this because of the atomic bomb and various other things. It's still very much a present danger. But I think it's morphed into us changing ourselves from inside, you know. The very nature of how we feel about reality and each other is under threat. And another thing we haven't spoken about in terms of information disruption is just how public opinion is so swayed, and I think we've all felt the siloing of opinion. You know, it's quite, you have to be very careful having conversations with people when you know that they're on one particular side of the fence with things. I know I felt that very much around Brexit in this country, that you just, everybody was hearing their own point of view repeated back to them endlessly, and it makes conversation impossible. You know, I have parents that live in the north. They have a very, I won't go into that whole thing, but they have a very different point of view on it to me, and there was it was a real point of contention for us, and I realise now that it's very important to stand above that and really figure out why this is happening and share an understanding between each other, and not just shut off ideas, because I think part of the feedback loop of the way we interact with technology and news and the media, it's shaping our minds. It already is shaping our minds.
This is so vital, Oli. I'm so happy you brought this up, because as you are speaking, I understood the difference between physical peace and inner peace. And that might be a big jump, but what we've had since World War II is a global era of more or less of physical peace, though there has been much war in specific areas. There has been physical peace in many areas as well, but there has not been inner peace. And in peace-building processes, what we have to do is meet each other in that place above, where it's no longer me versus you, and we come to an understanding. With technology, if we're having this constantly looped back to us, our own perspective, it robs us of the opportunity to meet in an above place, a different place, a third space would be the theoretical and academical way to say it. So how are we going to potentially handle this? Because AI has been planted already. It exists. People are running away with it like a new toy without, thinking more broadly. So what are some interventions we could make so that inner peace is not lost, so that the ability for us to meet human to human and actually create unity and a real peace, a real global peace, not just a physical one. We're on the verge of this too. We could annihilate ourselves, but we could come into harmony.
I don't know. I want there to be a solid answer to that question. That is the question. I think it's really easy to sit here in Sussex and say, let's talk, we should all talk about this more. And that, I'm very guilty of that. I think raising awareness is one thing, and taking personal responsibility, I think, is the other thing. I don't think you can force anybody to understand, but maybe we can, ideas like editorial control, I think that at the moment the internet, for example, is led by whatever gets the most eyeballs, and that that's revenue, and it's nobody's fault, nobody set it up that way, but we now have the potential to say, actually, hang on, that model doesn't work, because it just regurgitates the same things and throws us into very siloed ways of thinking. Why are we continuing with that? What are the systems that are perpetuating that How do we break that down while keeping the things that we all want for our freedom of speech? And it's complex. It's really, really complex. And like you, I have the grand vision of everybody waking up and realizing they should be living from the point of view of the heart and caring for each other. But then there's the practical element of we're still living nation states that are very protectionist and fearful of each other ultimately, and we sorry, that's quite broad, but I think it's the heart of it that we're sort of just maintaining the status quo rather than going, what do we want from it?
Yeah.
How can we shape it? Yeah.
So who needs to be thinking about what do we want from it? Who needs to be inputting to that conversation? And how could these conversations take shape so that they have an impact on the way AI develops?
Well, I think it's in the hands of business, I would guess. I think governments clearly, not to be all anti-government, but I don't think they have their head around it. And just the way that COVID was dealt with, and now we're seeing that inquiry, it's kind of clear that their focus is reactive, and we need to not be reactive. We need to really stand back and look at the longer term impact on a larger scale, a global scale. This is why working together globally, I don't know how I can push towards that. You tell me how we can push towards that idea, but I think
it's something to really think about. I often
climate change,
wonder,
information disruption, these are problems that only get sorted out on a global scale, and these are the things that if are not sorted out, we're not probably going to last more than 4 generations, I would imagine.
So I often think about how long the nation state can last and what might replace it. The nation state is actually crippling us and causing us to enter into deeper have and have-nots globally, global north-south, east-west, and it's actually causing us to enter into warfare. When we can meet as human beings, we might easily put down warfare. But when we're caught under the banner of a nation state, there's something in the way of that happening. So that is an idea that has also lost its usefulness. How do we get around that? I don't know yet. I don't know,
but the way we're currently using technology is only adding fuel to that fire currently.
Yeah.
But that's not the fault of the technology itself.
Right.
It's our misuse of our core ideologies, I guess.
So, Oli, this brings us to a wonderful point, which is what is technology? And interrogating what is technology may give us a loophole out of the dilemmas we're finding ourselves in as AI explodes into the population. Technology is, on the one hand, a mechanistic thing, but we have this concept of devotional practice and spiritual technologies which have saved many humans on a personal level and could be applied on a wider level. So we know, for instance, that meditation affects our neurophysiology, that when you get groups of meditators together, that the increase in that frequency affects everybody for the benefit and a wider area. And that's just one example. There are many practices much deeper than meditation. How can we shift our thinking around what technology is, and what is your experience and input on that conversation?
Yeah, well, I agree. Someone had said the word technology in relation to ancient practices, meditation, yoga, nidra, and various other things. And it really hit home with me that that's what it is. It's a way of understanding ourselves, and it taps into all that sort of Jungian archetypes and what's at the real core of the human being. But it's difficult, I think, for a secular society to think of that as technology, because it involves a certain level of belief. But I myself am very interested in devotional practices with meditation. I've been following a course about the Mahavidya goddesses, whom the primary one is Kali, and I'm very careful about who I speak to about that stuff, because people go, "Oh right, so you're into woo-woo things." But even without faith and belief, which I do personally have, but even without that, it's a technology that I know my brain responds to, my body responds to, and it has practical use. It's a tool in that way, if you want to boil it down to those things. And I think it's useful for humans to have faith and gratitude in something larger than themselves, which is an aspect of yourself already, but I think it's good to have humbling concepts, and there's a real technology to it. And the more I learn about mantra and learn about how we interact with visual ideas, it's very solidly a technology in my mind. But I think that's that has to be a felt experience. You can't really teach that without giving people a sort of inner knowing of what that is. And but I don't think most people would define anything that wasn't outside of themselves as technology.
Interesting. Machines are outside of ourselves, yet they're defined as technology.
No, that's what I'm saying. That way around, people normally think it's technology, it's outside of me, it's a tool, rather than it's a thing that is intrapenetrative of us.
So if we look at the science of meditation, of mantra, of prayer, of fasting, of many of the things that have been couched in religion previously and up till now, and we look at them as internal technologies that perhaps supplant and have more value than a biotechnology, we could have a shift in consciousness that's comparable to the shift happening through AI. This is a new thought to me that I'm having just in this moment. And that was going somewhere.
I think the devil's advocate to all of this is, someone could easily say, it's all very nice, you guys thinking about acting from the heart and doing things and being compassionate. Ultimately, someone will take advantage of that, If we're, in this country, for example, we're very protectionist. The thing about our borders is a big issue at the moment. If we really followed through on acting from the heart, in the short term, that wouldn't fit with the thinking at all, in terms of,
We are on the edge, though, of a massive leap in consciousness.
I hope so. I feel so.
Yeah, and how that's going to look, we're at the critical moment here in our generation, in our children's generation, for how that will play out, and if there will be a fifth, sixth, seventh generation from now. So when we begin to comprehend the magnitude of where we are, then we have no choice but to start trying different ways. And you're right, acting from the heart, if we say that technology from the inside has to be felt and experienced, then our priorities have to shift in how we spend our time in governance, in organization, in education, in these very important places where we meet. I'm just putting that idea out there because it's a new idea. And if we as human beings decide to run with that idea, there is potential beauty that could come. As you've said, the technology is not really the problem, but it's our ability to program it, direct it, contain it, and to know who we are using it and to set the priorities. We're on that juncture. And we were going to come to this juncture as a species with or without AI. We came to it with the atomic bomb, and now here it is in our face again. These are just my musings from our conversation.
No, I feel that, and I hope you're right, and I choose to be an optimist about those things. But I observe a lot of head burying, including myself, and a lack of clear understanding about how as individuals to move into a new way of doing things.
Yeah, I'll highlight what you said previously. Self-responsibility and how we engage with AI can be useful. And taking the time to meet person to person in that third space with the intention of peace building and of meeting from this metaphysical place called the heart, which does have a biological basis actually. So if we can take those steps, well, we might have a chance at impacting where we're headed.
Yeah, education of the heart ultimately, and getting out of the fear response that we're in as a whole. And remembering how to have fun.
Yes.
You know, intelligence. Einstein said that creativity is intelligence, just having fun. So, you know, we should remember to do that.
Yeah, joy and imagination. So, Benny Goodman says creativity is curiosity plus imagination. And for me, when we're in a joyful state, that's a state of flow. That's also a physiological state. Then imagination happens. Imagination doesn't happen when we're thinking apocalyptically.
No.
Yeah.
No, and I've felt that. I'm sure everybody has. You know, that sense of when you're in a fear response, you just go to the basics of what's needed, and you can't focus on larger things. And there's no need for that at the moment in the world. We're in a really defining moment where we have the thinking space, even though there's a lot of negativity in the world. We currently have afforded ourselves as a whole thinking space to develop these concepts that are more important to us. And this is the great thing, technology is freeing of time. The only problem is we just choose to fill it with the wrong things, or we just want to increase the pace rather than going, oh, that job can now be done by this machine, so that frees you up to teach a class about you know, integrating from the heart.
We can also use the outcomes of the time really purposefully. That's a choice we have to. This conversation has been so incredibly rich, Oli.
I know we could go on.
We could go on and on and on, and my own thinking has shifted and changed several times, which is what we want when we're meeting in these places. It's such a rich, fruitful topic.
Well, thank you for putting up with my waffles.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on, for sharing from the depth of your wisdom as a creator and also as a human being. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you would like to be in touch with Oli, the links to his company, Flock London, will be in the description, and do contact him. He's got such a brilliant mind and an incredible talent to apply in our world today. If you want to be on this podcast or have a story to share, please contact me, Hannah Jewell, your host, and have a wonderful rest of your day.